Before diving into this incredible story, remember to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Here, every story has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. Emily Parker was known for her discretion. At 22, the daughter of a cleaning woman and a bus driver, she had grown up in a modest neighborhood in Chicago. Shy but intelligent, she had learned early on to observe people, to notice details that others overlooked. Yet, she had never imagined that this talent would lead her to the heart of a circle of arrogant billionaires. That morning, she received a strange call. The prestigious Silver Oak Club, a private club reserved for the financial elite, was inviting her to attend a shooting demonstration. An administrative error, they said. Emily hesitated, aware that her modest attire and lack of social experience among the wealthy would immediately set her apart. But something inside her urged her to give it a try. Upon her arrival, she felt the heavy gaze of the guests, men and women dressed in impeccable suits, luxurious finery sparkling under the chandeliers. Among them, Richard Huntington, an eccentric billionaire known for his arrogance, and Victoria Somers, heiress to a financial empire, stood at the center of attention, laughing condescendingly at the young woman's every move. Emily tried to be discreet, but she couldn't escape the whispers and laughter. "Look at this little one," said Jacob Whitman, a famous investor, his voice full of contempt. "She doesn't even know how to hold a gun properly," sneered Victoria Somers. Each word was a stab in her pride. Her cheeks burned, but she didn't give in to anger. Instead, a spark of defiance ignited in her eyes. She realized that, despite the humiliation, she had a choice, to flee or to transform that humiliation into strength. As the billionaires continued their jeers, Emily watched the shooting range intently. Every target, every weapon, every gesture of the participants. An idea began to take root in her mind: she would never return to this club as the laughing face. She would return stronger, more precise, and those who laughed today would witness her silent revenge. That day, Emily Parker left the Silver Oak Club with a straight face but a burning heart. She didn't know it yet, but this humiliation would become the catalyst for her transformation. And when the time for her revenge came, no one, not Richard Huntington, not Victoria Somers, not Jacob Whitman, would be able to stop her. The day after her invitation to the Silver Oak Club, Emily Parker couldn't shake the humiliation from her mind. The laughter of the billionaires still echoed in her head like a cruel reverberation. Every word, every mocking gesture, had been imprinted on her memory, not to break her, but to fuel a newfound determination. That morning, she returned to the club, this time simply to observe the other participants. She wanted to understand the behavior of the rich and arrogant, their way of manipulating power and appearances. As soon as she stepped through the door of the shooting range, she felt eyes turning towards her. Richard Huntington, a massive man with a square jaw and an impeccable suit, stared at her with an ironic smile. Beside him, Victoria Somers, elegant and haughty, whispered to Jacob Whitman, pointing at Emily. "There you have it, little Parker," Whitman sneered. "I bet she's never hit a target in her life." The words hit Emily like an icy wind. She felt her face flush, but she didn't utter a word. Instead, she carefully observed the participants' gestures. Every movement, every posture, every breath, she memorized them. Every laugh, every condescending smile, she transformed into silent energy, an inner force ready to erupt at the opportune moment. Victoria Somers stepped towards her with a contemptuous smile. "You know, here, we don't play at being children," she said in a wicked tone. Emily responded only with a calm, focused look, as if her mere presence was a silent challenge. As the billionaires continued their mockery, Emily noticed an important detail: their overconfidence made them predictable. Every move was calculated out of habit, every shot sometimes lacking real focus. She understood that if she wanted revenge, she had to turn this observation into power. That day, Emily didn't fire a single shot. She left the club in determined silence, her heart burning with anger but her mind clear. She knew one thing: revenge wouldn't come with words, but with action, with precision, with a mastery those arrogant billionaires could never comprehend. And as she walked through the streets of Chicago, the cold wind against her face, Emily felt a conviction growing within her: one day, every laugh that had humiliated her would turn into respectful silence. Back in her small Chicago apartment, Emily Parker closed the door behind her and dropped her bag with a sigh. The taunts from the Silver Oak Club still echoed in her mind, but this time they no longer caused pain, they had become fuel. Every laugh, every condescending smile, fed her determination. Emily pulled out a small metal box she kept hidden under her bed. Inside were an old competition pistol and some ammunition. She had never spoken to anyone about her passion for shooting, but she knew she had a knack for it. Since she was 16, she had learned to aim accurately, but until now, she had never had the chance to truly test her skills against experienced opponents. That night, and every night that followed, Emily transformed her apartment into an improvised training ground. She would position herself in front of targets she had drawn herself and repeat the gestures, breathing, and postures until they became instinctive. Every movement was calculated, precise, and every shot aimed to reproduce the perfection she had imagined in her mind. But technique alone wasn't enough. Emily knew her strength came from her focus and her ability to remain calm under pressure. She practiced meditation, deep breathing, and constantly visualized the Silver Oak Club's shooting range. She saw the billionaires, their mocking faces, their arrogant postures, and every shot she imagined making hit the target perfectly. One evening, as she was adjusting her position in front of her target, a neighbor happened to walk in. It was Mark Benson, a former Olympic shooting champion who lived in the next apartment. After observing Emily for a few minutes, he said in astonishment, "You have exceptional accuracy, but you could be much better with a little guidance." Emily hesitated for a moment, but something in Mark's gaze inspired confidence. And so their training together began. Each day, he taught her advanced techniques, breath control, perfect body alignment, speed without sacrificing precision. Emily absorbed every piece of advice like a sponge, transforming her anger into discipline, her humiliation into strength. After several weeks, Emily was no longer the shy, hesitant young woman who had left the Silver Oak Club. She had become a precise, confident, and above all, ready markswoman. Every laugh from the billionaires, every taunt, was now nothing more than a silent anticipation of her revenge. Emily now knew one essential thing: when she returned, she would no longer be the victim. She would be the one who commanded respect, and no one, not even the most arrogant billionaires, could ignore her. Emily had never imagined that her unassuming talent would attract the attention of someone as experienced as Mark Benson. A former Olympic shooting champion, Mark had won several medals and trained professional shooters, but he was known for being strict and demanding. Yet, when he watched Emily that evening, he immediately sensed that she possessed something rare: natural precision and the ability to remain calm under pressure. "You have enormous potential," he said, gently adjusting the position of his hands on the gun. "But you have to learn to control your emotions. Anger and frustration can destabilize you, even if they give you energy." Emily nodded. She understood that her revenge would not only be physical, but mental. Mark began an intensive program: breathing exercises to calm the heart under stress, endurance training to maintain a stable position for hours, and shooting simulations where the pressure was maximum, as if the billionaires of the Silver Oak Club were present, laughing and mocking at every mistake. Each session was exhausting, but Emily pushed herself. She repeated the movements again and again, correcting every flaw, and each shot became more precise. Mark encouraged her but also pushed her to her limits. "If you want to impress these people, you can't just be good. You have to be impeccable." As the weeks passed, Emily transformed. Her hands no longer trembled, her breathing became steady, and each shot seemed to originate from her mind before she even fired it. But it wasn't just her technique that changed, her self-confidence grew. She was no longer the shy young woman who feared the judgment of others. She was ready to return to the Silver Oak Club, not to prove anything to others, but to demonstrate to herself the extent of her power. Mark Benson, who saw her progress every day, began to call her by an affectionate but respectful nickname, "my prodigy." Emily barely smiled, focused, but she knew that every word from Mark strengthened her resolve. Deep down, she felt that her moment of triumph was approaching, and that when the day came, everything she had learned would shine brightly. This mentor-student relationship wasn't just changing her technique, it was changing Emily herself. Past humiliation had transformed into discipline, fear into strategy, and anger into a quiet, focused strength. Every detail, every shot, every breath was preparing for the moment when the billionaires who had ridiculed her would discover that their arrogance was no match for a determined will and honed talent. The long-awaited day finally arrived. Emily Parker stood before the imposing gates of the Silver Oak Club, her hands tightly gripping her sports bag containing her shooting equipment. Her heart beat slightly, but it wasn't fear, it was the adrenaline of silent anticipation. The moment she stepped through the door, she felt eyes turning towards her. The familiar faces of the billionaires, Richard Huntington, Victoria Summers, and Jacob Whitman, froze. They all remembered the humiliation they had inflicted upon her a few weeks earlier. But Emily was no longer the shy, hesitant young woman they had mocked. Victoria Summers whispered to Jacob Whitman, her eyes wide with surprise. "Is that her? Little Parker?" Jacob chuckled nervously. "Yes, but she can't have improved that much, can she?" Richard Huntington stepped forward, his brows furrowed, a contemptuous smile plastered on his lips. "Well, look who's back, the shy little girl. Are you sure you want to be here, little one?" Emily didn't respond with words. She simply let her calm, focused gaze sweep the room. Every billionaire felt an uncomfortable shiver, there was something different about her aura. A silent, but undeniable, confidence emanated from her. The shooting competition began. The other participants, some club members and others guests, took their places at the shooting range, but all were stealing glances at Emily. Even the most experienced observers sensed that something unexpected was about to happen. Emily positioned herself at her stand, adjusted her weapon, and took a deep breath, recalling all the advice and training provided by Mark Benson. She visualized the billions and their contemptuous laughter as targets she would precisely take down. The first shot rang out. The sound echoed through the shooting range, followed by a perfect impact on the target. A murmur of surprise rippled through the room. Emily smiled inwardly. This was the beginning of her revenge. At that moment, she understood that this wasn't just a shooting competition, it was the moment when she would transform every past humiliation into a resounding victory. And the billionaires, those who had mocked her, would learn, to their astonishment, that beneath her apparent composure lay an unstoppable force. The competition was in full swing. The shots of the other participants echoed through the booth, but none seemed able to capture attention like Emily Parker. She stood straight, focused, every muscle in her body perfectly aligned. The calm on her face contrasted sharply with the growing nervousness of the billionaires. Richard Huntington, unable to hide his impatience, leaned towards Victoria Summers and murmured, "It can't get any better than this, it's impossible." Victoria looked at him skeptically, but a doubt was beginning to form in her eyes. Even Jacob Whitman, usually so self-assured, began to shudder as he watched Emily get ready. Emily took her first official shot. She took a deep breath, visualized the target, and released the trigger. The pistol clicked, and the bullet struck the center of the target perfectly. The shooting range, once bustling with laughter and conversation, fell into a shocked silence. A murmur rippled through the ranks. Comment. "It's perfect." Richard Huntington stiffened. His brows furrowed, and for the first time in years, his arrogance wavered. Victoria Summers looked away, unable to hide her astonishment. Jacob Whitman bit his lip, realizing that the young woman he had once ridiculed was no longer the same. Emily didn't smile, didn't rejoice. She focused on the second shot. Each bullet was precisely calculated, each movement meticulously executed. The murmurs and incredulous glances of the billionaires fueled her concentration rather than distracting her. At that moment, Emily understood a crucial truth: it wasn't just her technique that impressed, but her self-control. The fear, humiliation, and contempt that had marked her past had transformed into a silent, unstoppable force. Each subsequent shot increased the tension in the room. The billionaires began to feel the discomfort they once inflicted, their arrogance now clashed with a competence and confidence they could not ignore. Emily Parker was no longer the timid, ridiculed victim. She had become a force of precision and control. And this was just the beginning. The real surprises, the real lessons, would follow in the subsequent shots. Each shot Emily Parker fired raised the tension in the shooting range. The first had been a surprise, the second a shock. Now, as she adjusted her weapon for the fifth shot, the billionaires were beginning to feel a nervousness they had never known before. Richard Huntington clenched his jaw, unable to look away. His usual arrogance crumbled, replaced by a mixture of astonishment and frustration. Victoria Summers, normally so self-assured, let out a worried sigh. Even Jacob Whitman, who always considered himself superior, couldn't suppress a shudder as he watched Emily aim with surgical precision. Emily took a deep breath. She felt the weight of their stares, the judgment of the mockers, but she transformed this pressure into pure concentration. Every muscle in her body was perfectly aligned, every movement deliberate and methodical. The fifth shot was fired. The bullet struck the exact center of the target, a perfect impact that made the air in the shooting range tremble slightly. A heavy silence fell, broken only by the incredulous murmurs of the spectators. Amazing. She's perfect. Richard tapped the table lightly, trying to hide his surprise. Impossible. He muttered through gritted teeth. Victoria Summers looked away, unable to conceal her embarrassment. The laughter and teasing of the past had vanished completely, replaced by a silent but tense admiration. Emily didn't smile. She didn't want recognition, only complete mastery of her craft and the certainty that her revenge was underway. The subsequent shots continued to strike the targets with unparalleled precision. Each bullet was a silent message to the billionaires. Their arrogance meant nothing in the face of determination and talent. At this point, the atmosphere in the club had changed dramatically. The other participants watched Emily with astonishment and respect, while the billionaires, who had once mocked her, realized that this shy young woman had surpassed all their prejudices and expectations. It was no longer just a shooting competition. It was shining proof that patience, training, and self-control could transform humiliation into pure power. Emily Parker was now a force no one dared challenge. Emily's sixth shot rang out with chilling regularity. Every movement was precise, every breath controlled, every bullet striking the exact center of its target. The silence that followed was deafening. The incredulous murmurs of the spectators transformed into a collective gasp of astonishment. Richard Huntington, usually the master of his room, gripped the edge of his seat, unable to look away. Victoria Summers, her hands trembling slightly, gasped in surprise. Even Jacob Whitman felt his arrogance crumble as he watched the young woman he had once humiliated silently assert her dominance. Emily, for her part, remained impassive. She sought neither glory nor visible revenge. Each shot was calculated, each impact a silent proof that she had transformed her past humiliation into controlled power. Her composure contrasted sharply with the growing anxiety of the billionaires. "It's incredible," murmured a spectator, his eyes wide. She's perfect." For Emily, it wasn't just a matter of precision. It was achieving a perfect balance between discipline, self-control, and talent. The taunts that had scarred her were now just memories, transformed into a silent but relentless energy. As the seventh and eighth shots once again struck the exact center, a shiver ran through the Silver Oak Club. The billionaires, for the first time in years, realized they had underestimated a shy and unassuming young woman. Their arrogance had clashed with a skill and composure they could not ignore. Emily lowered her weapon for the ninth shot, her gaze sweeping the room. The previously mocking stares of the wealthy now fixed on her, filled with a mixture of respect and fear. Each shot she had fired so far had shattered the laughter and the sense of superiority they had once believed they possessed. When the ninth shot struck the target, a collective murmur arose. The billionaires, silent, realized the magnitude of the lesson they had just received. Emily Parker was not merely a skilled marksman. She had become the embodiment of discipline and determination, and none of them could rival the strength of her quiet mastery. As she prepared for her 10th and final shot, an almost supernatural calm descended upon the shooting range. Every eye was fixed on her. And in that silence, Emily Parker knew her revenge was complete. She hadn't shouted, hadn't retaliated with anger. Her victory lay in the precision of each shot, in the total mastery of her craft, in the absolute silence that had replaced the laughter of the past. The moment had arrived. Emily Parker stood straight, her eyes fixed on her final target. The 10th shot would represent not only the end of the competition, but also the culmination of all the weeks of training, discipline, and patience. Richard Huntington, Victoria Summers, and Jacob Whitman stood frozen, unable to hide their disbelief. Their faces betrayed a mixture of forced admiration and frustration. What they had underestimated, this shy young woman they had once humiliated, had just transformed every taunt into a dazzling display of talent and mastery. Emily took a deep breath. She visualized her target, placed it in the exact center of her mind, and released the trigger with perfect precision. The pistol rattled in the shooting range, and the bullet struck the center with almost supernatural accuracy. A total silence fell. Even the spectators, accustomed to high-level performances, were speechless. Not a word was spoken for long seconds, only the collective gasp of a stunned room. Emily didn't smile. She remained focused, aware that each shot had been a silent message: strength, control, and determination always triumph over arrogance and money. Richard Huntington inclined his head slightly, silently acknowledging the young woman's superiority. Victoria Summers averted her eyes, unable to conceal her respect. Jacob Whitman, meanwhile, felt his ego crumble. The old taunts, the cruel laughter, all of it had faded into a memory crushed by Emily's relentless performance. All 10 shots had been perfect. Each bullet had struck the exact center of its target, and each impact resonated like a silent masterstroke. The once so self-assured billionaires were silenced. They had witnessed an unforgettable lesson: underestimating someone, regardless of their background or appearance, could lead to utter humiliation. Emily slowly lowered her weapon, her gaze sweeping the room. There was no ostentatious triumph, no shouted vengeance. Her calm, her control, and her precision were her victory. The laughter of the past had died away, replaced by silent respect and astonishment. For Emily Parker, that day was much more than a victory in a shooting competition. It was proof that determination, training, and courage can transform pain and humiliation into a silent and irresistible power. And in that moment, she knew that nothing and no one could ever again underestimate the strength that lay dormant within her. The last echo of the 10th shot faded from view in the shooting range, giving way to an overwhelming silence. None of the billionaires present moved immediately. Each of them was frozen, confronted with a reality they had never considered. Emily Parker, the young woman they had humiliated and underestimated, had just surpassed them all, with unparalleled skill and precision. Richard Huntington, his face usually impassive, slowly approached her. For the first time, his gaze held neither arrogance nor contempt, but sincere recognition. "Emily. I didn't know you were capable of that," he murmured, his words betraying both surprise and respect. Victoria Summers, for her part, lowered her head slightly, aware of her own past arrogance. She almost murmured to herself, "I never would have thought." Jacob Whitman, the most skeptical of all, cleared his throat. His arrogant smile had disappeared, replaced by a strange feeling he had never experienced in the presence of someone so young and determined: humility. Emily, standing before them, remained calm. She wasn't trying to humiliate them further. Her goal had never been to belittle these billionaires, but to demonstrate the strength of her discipline and talent. Her composure, precision, and confidence spoke for themselves. The other contestants, who had watched every shot, began to applaud tentatively, then more loudly. Respect and admiration for Emily spread through the room like a silent wave. She had won not only the competition, but also the respect of those who, just a few weeks earlier, had ignored or mocked her. Emily took a deep breath and smiled slightly. The billionaire's gaze, once mocking and condescending, was now full of respect. She had proven that money and power alone are no match for skill, determination, and talent. On that day, Emily Parker left the Silver Oak Club shooting range not only as a champion shooter, but as a respected figure, a living symbol of the quiet power that comes from perseverance and discipline. The laughter of the past had disappeared. And in the respectful silence of the room, Emily knew that her revenge had been accomplished, without a word, without fanfare, simply by the strength of her art and her self-control. The competition over, Emily Parker left the Silver Oak Club, her bag slung over her shoulder, her step light but steady. Every corner of the room, every face, reminded her that her life had just changed dramatically. The billionaires who had once humiliated her were now nothing more than a distant memory, transformed into respect and silent admiration. In the days that followed, her name circulated within the club's inner circle. Members spoke of this young woman who, with calm and precision, had silenced arrogant laughter and commanded a respect that no title or fortune could have guaranteed. Emily, however, wasn't seeking fame. She had learned something far more valuable: self-confidence and the certainty that her potential surpassed all outside judgment. Her mentor, Mark Benson, watched her with pride. "You've done more than prove your talent. You've shown that discipline and self-control are more powerful than any arrogance," he told her. Emily smiled at him, aware that his advice and support had been essential, but that her victory stemmed above all from her personal determination. For Emily, this experience was not just a revenge against those who had humiliated her. It represented a turning point in her life, the certainty that her humble origins did not determine her worth, and that her will could transform adversity into strength. She continued to train, perfecting her art, but with a freer and more confident spirit. Her goal was no longer revenge, but excellence. She now accepted challenges calmly, sure of her abilities and aware of the power of perseverance. And every time she thought back to that day when the billionaires had laughed at her, a slight smile appeared on her lips. For Emily Parker had learned a lesson that no one could ever take away from her: true power is not measured by money, status, or the mockery of others, but by inner strength, courage, and self-control. Thus, the young woman who had been humiliated at the shooting range was no longer the same. She had become a figure of respect, discipline, and quiet victory. A new life opened before her, full of possibilities and promises, where every challenge would be faced with the same quiet determination that had silenced the billionaires.